Hi, everyone. Welcome today. We are having a wonderful panel ahead of us today. We're going to be talking about attending college during a pandemic, some tips to help you and the mental health impact on your students today and your family and how we'll be able to help you. My name is Marlena Holden. I'm the Director of I'm the Director of Marketing and Strategic Communications at UHS, University Health Services. And joining us today is Dr. Sarah Nolan, our Director of Mental Health Services. Dr. Nolan joined us in August. We're thrilled to have her here, as again, she's the Director of Mental Health Services, where we have about 70 mental health professionals on site to help your student succeed at UW-Madison. So we do have a list of topics that we're hoping to cover today, but we really want to hear from you. So please feel free to continue to submit your questions using the link in the YouTube or Facebook description. And now I'll let Dr. Nolan introduce herself. And I'm sorry, I tried to take your job for a second, Dr. Nolan, when I pretended to introduce myself as such, but great to have you. And if you could please introduce yourself. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Marlena, you can't have my job. My name is Sarah Nolan, as Marlena said, and I am the Director of Mental Health Services at UW-Madison. I'm so pleased that folks are joining us this afternoon because truly being part of this conversation, being willing to understand the importance and show up to have this conversation and hear about what's happening on campus is a really critical step towards supporting all of our students. I want to be able to answer as many questions as possible, but I do want to take a few minutes before we dive into questions to talk a little bit about what services are available to your students. We find that even though we try to tell folks as soon as they get to school, even before they come to school and throughout their time here about the services that we have, that typically, and I think a lot of people can relate to this because it happens to many of us, that we sort of put things like that in the back of our brain. And then when we are really in crisis or dealing with something difficult, it's hard for us to remember that those things are available to us. So parents and families can play a really important role here in helping remind students as they start to dip emotionally and psychologically that there is a place on campus where they can get real phenomenal help. As Marlena said, we have one of the largest and most robust counseling centers in the country. We have a number of staff with diverse identities, backgrounds, experiences, and interests to really serve the student population. So let me tell you a little bit about our traditional services, and then I'll tell you what that's looking like during the pandemic. We offer individual counseling, group counseling, and couples counseling. The first appointment that a student needs in order to be able to get in for individual counseling is called an access appointment. Students can make that appointment either by going online onto our website and logging into the portal and making an appointment, or by calling our phone number. Once students make that appointment, that first appointment is about 30 minutes, and it's really a great intro to figure out what exactly does the student need. So they'll meet for 30 minutes with a mental health professional who will help walk them through what's going on for them and what is going to be the most appropriate service for them going forward. We've committed to having no longer than 2-week wait times for students to get in for appointments. And we do our best to get students in as soon as possible because we know that we've really got to capitalize on that moment at which students are ready to do something about their mental health. Our groups program is something that folks don't even need to make that first appointment for. They can go straight to the groups provider if they'd like. So a list of our groups is on the website, and along with that list of groups and descriptions is the name of each facilitator for those groups. We have a range of groups, and group therapy can be a little bit intimidating to folks, but it's a really, really great way to get support, particularly for college-age students. Encouraging peer support around issues like social anxiety, identity concerns, feelings of isolation is really, really helpful. Right now, in COVID times, these groups are more important than ever. It's a way for folks to go into a Zoom room that is going to be facilitated by 2 mental health folks and is going to have peers who are dealing with a lot of the same issues. All of our services are occurring during the pandemic virtually. So we do have some staff who are on campus every day in the event that there's an emergency, but all of our services are occurring on Zoom for the safety and well-being of everybody involved. So students can find out lots of information on our website. I really encourage you to take a look at our website so that you can walk your student through it, but also encourage your students to kind of go on there and figure out what resources are going to be best for them. We have 2 online resources. One is called Silver Cloud and one is called You at Whisk. And these are great for students who are either not quite ready to cross that line to actually talking to a professional, but think that they want to explore some things around mental health online. They also sort of create these customized experiences for students. So students go in and they set up a profile and talk a little bit about what it is that they're struggling with. And then the application will help them find a path that works for the things that they're dealing with. So just one more quick note about COVID, and I realize that I could go on for hours talking about all of these issues related to mental health, which I suppose is a good thing considering my profession. But, you know, when we look at what students are dealing with right now when it comes to mental health, it is not that different than what they've been dealing with for years. So the top concerns that we see walking in our door at UW-Madison's mental health services mirrors what's happening across the country and what's been happening for years. So the top concerns are anxiety, stress, depression, and relationship concerns. What's different, interestingly, about this year is that attention issues are now the number 5 for UW-Madison students. This is unsurprising to any of us who have been working from home or having to take all of our meetings virtually. So students are really struggling to manage and concentrate. So that's what we know about what's different about presenting concerns. Anxiety and depression have been issues for a while for college students at the top of the charts. Students are dealing with increased severity of these issues. So, you know, depressive symptoms and anxious symptoms are up from what they have been in previous years. The 2 things that I point to as causing the most additional distress for students right now, and truly for all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, the first one is grief and loss. So grief and loss is a huge part of this pandemic experience. And I think it's really hard for folks to fully acknowledge that and validate that for themselves, because a lot of the things that we're grieving are not necessarily human life or the things that we're traditionally used to thinking about when we think about grief and loss. But there are major life transitions, major experiences that students thought that they would get, that it feels like everybody else has gotten the opportunity to have, that they're not getting right now. And so there is grief associated with that. The other major concern that's different right now is it's different, it's exacerbated right now, is the lack of having any clarity about what's going to come next. So many of us feel like, when is this pandemic going to end? When are we going to go back to our normal way of being? And we can't really give folks answers to those questions. And that uncertainty is really, really hard for folks to live with. So I would say that those 2 issues are the kind of new and pronounced things that are coming through the door right now. So I have lots more to say, but with that said, I'm going to see what questions we have coming through.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan, and thank you for those who might just be joining us. We are here with Dr. Sarah Nolan, the Director of Mental Health Services at UW-Madison, talking about how to manage anxiety and depression and supporting your student during their college days. Once again, I'm Marlena Holden. I'm also at University Health Services, known as UHS, with Dr. Nolan. If you want to continue to submit questions, please do so in the links provided below. Another website that Dr. Nolan mentioned was uhs.wisc.edu. That's UHS's website. There you can find information about how to schedule some initial appointments related to mental health services. We also have one phone number for all of our services. That is 608-265-5600. There you'll also be able to speak to someone at our front desk during typical business hours, Monday through Friday, if you want to talk about scheduling your first appointment. So we do have our first question coming in for Dr. Nolan, but one thing I definitely want to emphasize is that services at UHS are no cost to you and your student. The reason they're no cost is because those are paid for with their tuition and fees. So we're able to provide robust services. We're able to provide, timely, relevant services for your student during this time at no additional cost. And we're really proud that we're able to do that because it removes at least one barrier in terms of receiving access to care. So what I really want to emphasize to parents and families is that we are here for you, not only through mental health services, but also our other clinical and prevention services as well. So one question has come in, Dr. Nolan. And the question is, we've all been living through multiple crises, COVID-19, an economic recession, and racial justice, just to name a few. How can we support students living through these different levels of trauma?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have two thoughts. My first is to really emphasize the fact that we are all living through this experience, and it is impacting all of us in different ways, because we all have different identities and different experiences and different histories that are going to connect to how this impacts us in varying ways. So the same is true for our students. So it's really important for us to, this is something I talk to my staff about all the time, and faculty and staff across campus. Parents and families, I want you to hear me right now when I say, in order for us to be able to adequately support our students going through this, we have got to take care of ourselves in going through this. So figuring out what it is that we need will not only fill up our emotional cups so that we can withstand the distress that our students are going through, but it will also help us develop some empathy for their reactions to our attempts to support them. So I think thinking about, those of us who have been on this earth longer than most of our students have been through different crises, different traumatic experiences before. And so thinking about what is helpful to you in those moments may be helpful to just considering the range of options that might be helpful to your student. From a psychologist perspective, when we think about trauma-informed care, so some of the really important things are to keep structure. So having expectations for your students is important right now. It can feel like you just want to make this easier for them, and I completely understand that. And we do want to make this easier for them, but the reality is we can't possibly remove all the discomfort of this time period or this experience. And so what we want to really do is help them learn to tolerate that discomfort, and help them understand that there's still an expectation that you have for them as people. You still believe in them, you still believe in their future. And so helping them understand that by having expectations academically, having expectations for how they're going to treat you and their other loved ones is really an important part of this process.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I know we could hear from you forever, but I want to keep getting questions because we do have a number of questions rolling in. For those who have just joined us, you can submit questions in the links below. Again, we're with Dr. Sarah Nolan, a psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Services here at UW-Madison. And this next question is going to be about our group counseling sessions. And in typical times, we sometimes have more than 4 dozen group sessions available, and they range from all types of topics to really support our students. So this next question that comes in is, how can I prepare my student for group counseling? They're nervous about what to expect and what type of setting, and talking about their issues in front of their peers that they've never met before. Dr. Nolan, can you please give us some guidance about how to best support a student who might be going into group counseling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to remind students who are interested in group counseling or even mildly considering group counseling that everybody else who's going into that group feels very similar to them. The issue with groups is that it's best, especially for folks who are dealing with some social anxiety. And so the irony of that is what serves as a barrier oftentimes. So I would encourage you to help them understand, to help them think about who else might be in this group. It's going to be your other peers who are feeling almost exactly the same way that you are. The other thing that I would do is to remind them of how far they've come. Now they're used to doing all of this, and maybe some of them were more used to it than we were, than many of us were, but they're used to being on screens with other people that they don't know all the time now. And so reminding them about some of these things that they may be forgetting because the anxiety may be overriding what they know to be true. I also would say, so a really important resource that we have is called Let's Talk. And Let's Talk is a 20 to 30 minute meeting with a clinician from our office. And you can sign up until noon. It occurs every day, every morning and every afternoon. And you can sign up on our website up until noon the day before. And we almost always have availability. So it's a way to get in with someone like the next day. And in these 20 to 30 minute sessions, it's a great place for a student to schedule this meeting with a clinician and say, I'm thinking about a group, I'm nervous about it. Can you help me understand if this is something that would be good for me to do? I think that can really remove the barrier of feeling like, okay, I have to wait for a true therapy appointment to have this conversation. So I would encourage that. I'll cut myself off, Marlena, so that you don't have to, because I'm sure that you have heard about it.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I think having you mention Let's Talk is really important as a way to emphasize that every single day we're providing 2 hours of counseling, informal counseling for folks, typically across campus, but as you said, scheduling the day before, that you would be able to speak to a licensed provider to help talk through a range of issues. And those people might be sometimes the first way that people are connecting to a provider on campus and in a safe environment. So the next question is a question that looks a little bit about the difference in receiving care at UHS versus what receiving care from a therapist in the community might be like. What is the difference between getting counseling at UHS versus going into the community?
Yeah, so good question. So university counseling centers across the country over the last few years, have been facing major increases in demand that can't necessarily be adequately met by the staffing that we have, even at our high levels of staffing. And this is a good thing in some ways, because what it means is that the stigma is being reduced for students who are coming to college, which is really great that they're seeking out support. So we have to make some decisions when students come in the door to make sure that our doors are always open to every student who's interested in getting care. And so one of the ways that we do that is that we have care management. And so what that means is that when a student makes their first appointment, one of the places that they could get directed from that first appointment is to a care management appointment, where they would meet with someone to help them look at their insurance and figure out if there's someone in the community, a provider in the community, who could offer them the kind of care that they're looking for, who will take their insurance and who will be accessible to them in terms of being able to get there from living on campus or wherever the student lives. Decisions that go, or things that go into making that decision about whether or not someone should be referred off campus are things like, is there a particular specialty area that a provider off campus has that we don't necessarily have the expertise for in-house? Another might be that we can't offer long-term treatment. And I realize the vagueness with which I just said long-term, but there's so much variance. There's so many different things that go into making that decision. So if a student is looking for, has had therapy in the past, and so is pretty self-aware and says, I'm going to need treatment weekly, indefinitely, that would probably be sent to care management for a referral off campus, because at certain points in the year, we can't offer weekly treatment because of our capacity. And so in order to get best care for that student, we'd want them to hook into a therapist in the community to make sure that during those times of the year, they're going to be getting the services that they need. So those are some of the things that go into that decision-making process. But the goal with every appointment that comes in the door is for us to make sure that that student's getting exactly what they need from a clinical perspective.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I have the opportunity in typical times, and even this summer, to speak at every single SOAR event, which is student orientation and registration. And I love speaking to the families. And one of the pieces that we often try to convey to families is to tell your student that asking for help is normal and a sign of strength. So this is something that as a family member hopefully you can keep in mind as something to share with your student, again, that asking for help is normal and is a sign of strength, which leads to this next question that we're getting. So again, you can submit your questions in the links provided below. We are taking live questions. We do have some prepared comments as well. But this next question is, again, related to COVID-19. And the parent or family member is asking, I'm struggling with COVID-19 and the trauma right now as a parent too. How can I comfort my student as they are dealing with all of this without either sugarcoating or alarming them?
It's a really good question. Again, that I think a lot of us are thinking about. So, our students are adults and also they're young adults. And so we don't want to put them in situations that are going to unnecessarily traumatize them or scare them or make them more anxious. While at the same time, part of helping them build resilience as they move forward in the world is helping them understand that realities exist and allowing them to be able to tolerate the discomfort of that. And that is a very difficult thing to do. So, when I think about the things that it's important to have in place, we can't protect our students or our loved ones at all from the reality of COVID. And we can't protect them from a lot of things. But what we do know is that if we have certain things in place, that even though these things are happening, they will be able to get through this storm successfully emotionally. And those things include love, empathy, connection, and structure. So I think creating, ensuring, and obviously if you're on this call, you already are expressing your love. This is a way of expressing love to your student, but expressing empathy. I know this is hard. Self-disclosing about how hard this is for you. I'm also scared. And yet I know that we're going to get through to the other side of this. So when I think about students who are in distress and people who are in distress, I often think about tunnel vision. What happens to people that makes it scary and hard to come back from is that, and we see this a lot with college students because their perspective is a little bit more limited than a full adult. So as they get worried about something, they get this tunnel vision, and it's all they can think about, and it's all they can think about, and they forget that there's going to be life after this really difficult event. And so we need to be with them, empathize, and sit with them and say, this is scary, this is awful, this is tragic. And also that exists at the same time as this future exists. You are still going to graduate from college. You are still going to have a career. You are still going to have this future. And I think one thing that we can do to help them remember that is with this upcoming winter break, make some plans now that they can look forward to. Give them something to be hopeful about, something to be excited about, even if it's like a social distance gathering with 3 of their friends from high school in the backyard, or their favorite dinner and movie night with their family. But they need to have things to be excited and hopeful about so that they can remember, they can look sort of 3 steps in front of them and remember that there's a light at the end of this tunnel, because there is a light at the end of this tunnel. A lot of bad things are happening right now, and a lot of bad things are going to happen. And also, we're going to get through this.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I already feel better. To you. I think all of us need to hear this again as family members, as those supporting our students at UW-Madison. So thank you for this. The next question we have is something that I think I imagine hear quite often, and it is a common one that we hear at UHS, which is, at what point as a parent or family member should someone be concerned? What's the differentiation between everyday struggles, trying to support your student through challenging times, and really needing to be concerned about one's mental health? Are there tips or ways that you can recommend to folks to listen to?
Yeah, so parents and family members are, to me, so critical in trying to determine how badly a student is struggling, because you knew them before we knew them. And so when you see like a major change in behavior, something significant that's different from what it used to be, like major isolating or reactivity, that is cause for concern. Additionally, I would say talking about not having hope, not being able to see the future, not being able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, feeling very pessimistic and negative about not only what's happening today, but what's happening ongoing. I would say to parents, we absolutely are here to support you. Please reach out to us. The services we offer to parents are consultation. Reach out to us if you're worried about your student, or if you just want to sort of like run through the specific scenario of your student. And I think we can I often refer to us in the Dean of Students office as the quarterbacks, because we can take all of and this, as I explain this, you're going to realize I really don't understand what a quarterback does fully, but we can take everything you say to us, and we can look in our system and just look at information that we may not be able to share with you, but we can help advise you about how to work with your student based on a lot of information that you may not have at your fingertips. So please do reach out. You can call us from 8:30 to 5, and we're available. And you can also email us. Our email addresses are available on the website.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nolan. You also referenced the Dean of Students Office. We'll be sure to put a link to the Student of Concern form that the Dean of Students Office manages. We can put that in the show notes after this. Again, for those who are just joining us, we are here with Dr. Sarah Nolan, a psychologist, and the Director of Mental Health Services at UW-Madison, where Sarah works with 70 providers to really support your family and your student. Again, UHS has our website, which is uhs.wisc.edu. There you can find a ton of resources. We also have a link on there for families to support students, information about how to make an appointment. We have one phone number for all of our services as well. That's 608-265-5600. In addition to calling during our typical business hours, we do have a 24/7 mental health crisis line, a triage center as well. So when we say we are here for you and your student, we truly are. We hope that you reach out. Again, asking for help is a sign of strength, and we're here to really support you. So another question is related to, helping first-year students. I myself went to UW-Madison. I remember moving into Chadbourne Hall in 1996 and just feeling like I had a ton of people that I could connect with. It was set up for me to really thrive and make connections. But how can we support our first-year students this year when they're feeling lonely, isolated on campus? Are there any skills or strategies they can use to help make those connections from afar? Any advice you have would be great.
Yeah, it's more important than ever for students to get involved in student organizations, which still exist. And helping your students remember that those things still exist is really, really important. So I would, especially with the break coming, if your student's going to be home for Thanksgiving, walk with them through the website and find out what they might be interested in and joining. Reminding them and reminding yourselves that there are a lot of first-year students who are feeling the same way, who are eager to make those connections. I do know that a lot of offices on campus are making efforts to reach out to first-year students and to come up with some innovative ways to support first-year students. There was an article in the Times last weekend that really highlighted the struggle of first-year students, which makes me happy that there's exposure to that. But certainly there are, I'm going to always pitch my own groups, but I think group therapy for just sort of like making connections, building connections. We also have something called processing spaces at Mental Health Services, which is not group therapy. It's like a connection and support network, and it's weekly. And one of them is on dealing with the isolation right now. You can find a link to that on our website. Again, that's something that a student doesn't have to wait to get into. They can just sign up until, I believe, midnight the night before. So really, I think working with your student to help them explore and find the resources that already exist is really important.
Thanks. You make some great points. And I also want to emphasize that for those who are still in the campus area, the new Nicholas Recreation Center did open up recently. So they have revised guidelines about how many students can be in the space. There's masking guidelines. There's cleaning guidelines as well. It's a beautiful new space. So I truly encourage you to encourage your student to check that out as well. Recreation and Wellbeing is also offering online classes. So I've heard some great things about their online Zumba class. I believe they have a strength class, and they're going to have some group fitness classes opening up soon with, again, no more than 9 people in the room, distanced, masked, etc. So there is still a lot for people to do, even outdoors, maintaining the physical distance, wearing masks. Right now with fall in full swing in Madison, while the leaves are still crunchy, you can always recommend your student take a walk down the lakeshore path and just really, truly enjoy some of the things that are happening during this fall. So one of the things, we have another question that came in, Dr. Nolan, is asking to speak a little bit more about grief and loss. So, many of our students, ourselves included, really did experience a lot of grief and loss. How do we actually help people? How do we help our students through those emotions?
Yeah, so, we've all grieved things before, and I think one of the things we know about grief is that we all do it differently. One thing that's pretty clear about the grief and loss associated with the pandemic is that it's been very hard for people to acknowledge it as grief and loss. And I think that's really the first step. Oftentimes we associate grief and loss with death, and occasionally with the end of a relationship or the end of some major episode of your life. And so we see those things as loss, but we really need to validate for our students and for ourselves the loss associated with certain things. Folks who have first-year students, the loss is so intense that happened for both their senior year in high school graduation, prom, and now also for your first year in college. Everything that these students have, thought about with regard to this period of their lives is different than it was going to be. And it's really important for us to validate that. Distraction can be a really healthy coping strategy, but distraction in recent years has become a lot of how a lot of people function. So constantly using the internet and, of course we rely on the internet now. So, no offense, internet, but using the internet and other things to always be distracted from ourselves. And so one of the things we have the opportunity to do right now is to sit with our feelings a little bit. And I think for this generation of students, that could be a silver lining of this. I would really encourage you to talk with your students about ways to understand how they're feeling. Because in order for them to be able to cope with how they're feeling, they need to kind of dig into it a little bit. And that does not need to happen in therapy. It can happen in therapy, but it also can happen in a journal, or in a book, or taking a walk, listening to music. But having students go to these sort of slower paced places with themselves and then inviting them to talk to you about what they've discovered can be a really helpful way to walk them through what this process is going to be like for them. And also, this is a huge opportunity to learn for themselves about how they deal with grief and loss and how they come out of it and what they do with that information. I think journaling is something I talk about. And then if I try to sit down with a journal, it's very hard to do. But journaling, and you can find some tips online. There's some really great things available. But you can do some guided journaling, which can have some, prompts to help you walk through some things. So prompts that I would encourage students to look at right now are, how are you, start in the morning. How are you feeling this morning? How did you sleep? What's on your mind? What do you wish was different about your life right now? What are you excited about today? What are you excited about this week? What are you excited about this year? What are you sad about this year? So helping them process that and then talking to them about it would be really where I would go.
That sounds great. I hear too, when you're talking about the structure again and routine, and that's something that you referenced earlier, is that actually in times of crisis, people want and need more structure. For those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Dr. Sarah Nolan, a psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Services at UHS at UW-Madison. And Dr. Nolan's also new to the Madison area. So when we talk about routine, one thing I've been plugging to her is go to the lake every day. It'll really help set a reflection of what life is like in Madison. And that's one of my tips that I give to all people who move to Madison. So if you can kind of nudge your student and say, take a look at the lake. For those who are living downtown, they are very close to either Lake Monona or Lake Mendota. And there's something quite reflective and meditative to looking at the lake every day throughout these seasons. And I have an increased appreciation for that myself, as since we've been at home since March, seeing the difference of the lake, and that becomes a time of reflection for myself and my family. So something that I've taken, and I encourage you to pass along to your student. So, Dr. Nolan, you work with a large staff, 70 people or so. There's trainees, you have psychologists, you have social workers. Can you tell us a little bit about your staff, some of their specialties, some of their backgrounds, what some students would see if they were to come to mental health services?
Yeah, it's a great staff. I have the best staff. So as Marlena said, we have about 65 to 70 people who could keep track. The reason I don't know the number exactly is because we do have a number of trainees who are with us for the year and who are trainees in mental health counseling and psychology. But our staff is very diverse. We are a multilingual staff. We have Spanish-speaking providers. We have a Mandarin-speaking provider. We have staff who have lots of identities when it comes to race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender. So truly, and we do really encourage students to look at our website and find a provider that they feel like they may identify more with, because we all know that the most critical part of therapy is to be able to trust and have a relationship with your therapist. We offer a lot of different sort of specialty areas. We do have an entire group dedicated to working with survivors of violence, of sexual violence. We also do work with eating disorders, learning disorders, depression and anxiety, as I said, are the two main issues that come in. And so, all of our providers are competent at working with those concerns. We do have a number of folks who have specialty areas in terms of the types of students they work with, the academic types of students they work with. So engineering, those who are in the medical fields. So a lot of variety, but I would really, our website is great, hat tip Marlena, and it's got really great pictures and descriptions of our providers. So take a look there. We have providers who have, we have a diverse group when it comes to training backgrounds. So we have psychologists, we also have mental health counselors, and we also have social workers, which is important because those areas offer different expertise even within the field of mental health. So it offers a lot of breadth to our work.
Great. I know one of the more popular groups and people that providers work with are graduate students. And I think one of the most popular ongoing groups has been like a dissertators support group. So again, we're here not only for undergraduate students, but all professional students. As Dr. Nolan mentioned, we have direct connection with supporting medical students, those in engineering, et cetera. So really here for all types of modalities to help support students. There's another question that came in, and for those who are just joining us, you can continue to submit questions in the links. There's information in the links below. And this one again is about processing spaces. Can you talk a little bit more about how we are supporting students who might be in quarantine or isolation on campus?
Yes. So we often talk in our field about sort of making sure that we're offering unique services to vulnerable populations. And now we have a brand new vulnerable population, which is students who are in quarantine and isolation. So we do have a processing space that's available. It actually has gone underutilized. It's one of our services that I think for some reason students don't seem to be as aware of it. So if you have a student who goes into quarantine or isolation, please do encourage them to look on our website for the processing space for students who are in quarantine. So what that group would be is just sort of a support space to talk about some of the common issues that come up with being in quarantine and isolation. Another initiative that we've started in our office is that every time a student enters quarantine or isolation from campus, they receive an email from our office saying, we understand that this is a difficult place to be. Here's our number if you need support. But we also in that email say, if you would like us to reach out to you in the next few days, please let us know. And then there's a link so that they can send us their name and information. And then we reach out to them to get them hooked into whatever services they need. We have been working really closely with folks across student affairs, so folks in housing and folks in the Dean of Students office on a calling project, which took place this fall. And what we did was every student who went into quarantine and isolation on campus was routed to a staff or faculty volunteer who called them and built a relationship with them and checked in on them if the student wanted that. So I think what we know is that human connection is really, really important right now. And so what we try to do with our students who are in quarantine and isolation is offer them as much connection as possible without driving them to be angry with us. But I would say from the thing with all of this, we do have to be like, all of this is great, and also some students are don't necessarily want our support or don't want your support. What we need to do is be patient with them and make sure that they're getting some support. So some students, they're like, I've got my friends, that's what I want right now. And as your role as parents and our role as staff is just to make sure that they're actually using those supports. You don't have to use us. You don't have to talk to me about your problems, but make sure you're talking to the people you need to be talking to about the problems. And even if they get irritated with you in response to that, they are hearing you.
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I am learning so much from this conversation as a parent myself. So I have this little notebook. So thank you very much for this as well. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, we're here with Dr. Sarah Nolan, a psychologist and director of mental services at UW-Madison. Thrilled to have you join us. Dr. Nolan, can you speak a little bit about when a provider should recognize when it's time for maybe a student to go on medication and how they would be connected with psychiatry or some other type of prescriber at UHS?
Yeah, great question. So, there's a lot of science that we look at to make those decisions. Severe depression is one thing that's been really clearly identified as something that is best treated by a combination of talk therapy and medication. So when we see that a student going into that sort of episode or coming in the door with that, we would refer them for medication. So it's really a decision based on presenting problem and then clinical judgment, and then talking it through with the student about their comfort with it. When I talk to students about medication, and again, I'm going to disclose, I've never surfed, but here's my metaphor. It's like learning to surf, in that you don't start in the big waves. And so a lot of times when students are dealing with crippling anxiety or depression, it's like picking up a surfboard and going out into the Pacific and trying to go on these giant waves. And it's just never going to work. You're never going to learn how to do it if that's where you start. And so what a medication can do, because a lot of students are worried, well, I don't want to be on medication for the rest of my life. You don't have to be on medication for the rest of your life most of the time. And so what I'll tell them is, what a medication can do is help bring the waves down. And so then you can be in this like shallow little wave pool for a bit while you get your sea legs and while you learn how to surf. And then once you've gotten those skills and you're surfing, then, we can, again, I'm not a physician, but from what I know about this, then you can be weaned off of those medications so that you can eventually cope with life with the skills that you've learned. But it's about giving them an opportunity to actually learn those skills when they are predisposed to having so much anxiety or depression that they're not able to.
Thank you. I really like the way that you're thinking about this, is that, and it can feel like, again, somebody's in this overwhelming place, and then just helping people get a little bit where they need to be. Thank you for that. So this next question from a parent, I think, is one that's very common, is really speaking to loneliness. How do we support people who are truly feeling lonely during this time? I think that's something that everyone at home could be feeling at various times, but do you have any tips for how to support that student so they can thrive where they're at?
Yeah, again, I think, encouraging them, we've got to approach this with from many angles. So encouraging them, have you ever heard of mental health services? I met this great looking, smart, interesting psychologist, if you want to say that, letting them know, and it can help if you've met somebody from my office, but letting them know that there's somebody there that they could talk to. Would you just want to do this drop-in thing? Our Let's Talk program, students don't even have to share much information about themselves. It is not counseling. It's just a drop-in meeting with a mental health provider. So kind of giving them a little bit of a push there, checking in with them about how they are doing with reaching out to social circles. And it doesn't have to be, a lot of us just sort of want to go back to what we know best. And so if they have some good high school friends, but they've struggled to make friends at UW-Madison, then maybe suggest to them in a moderately pushy way that they set up a Zoom time with some of their high school friends. Do things to help them create a space that's going to be something that's going to give them human connection. It doesn't have to be at UW-Madison. It's got to be just something that's going to feed their soul a little bit.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. And again, I really want to emphasize that all of the services at UHS are no cost because they're paid for with tuition and fees. So we truly mean it when we say that we're here for you. We've removed as many barriers as possible so students are able to seek out services, whether that's individual counseling, whether that's group counseling, processing spaces, Let's Talk. Again, we're here for you. I think in a typical year, we see mental health services sees more than 6,000 patients. Last year alone, UHS had more than 111,000 patient visits. So we are a fully operational ambulatory medical center. In addition to mental health services, we have primary care and other specialty clinics. Primary care alone sees more than 30,000 patients, and they have an incredible relationship with mental health services to make sure that we're looking at the whole student. And one thing I really want to emphasize that I've seen working at UHS for the past 5 years is that we really meet students where they're at. And people are coming to us, from different places. And I think you spoke to that a little bit when you talked about the providers that you have on staff. You have providers with different identities. You have providers who are Spanish speaking. There's a Mandarin speaking provider. We have people who are veterans, we have people who are first generation students, we have people who are towards the beginning of their career, towards the end of their career. So we're really able, again, to meet students where they're at. And one thing, again, I know I've said this over and over, but as a parent, really understanding and letting your student know that asking for help is normal and a sign of strength. So another question that has come up a little bit is, how can we really help with the anxiety, not like a diagnosed anxiety, but the anxiety of what's going on? So in terms of, we want to adhere to public health guidelines, but we're a little, it's scary to think about the grand scope of what's going on. Like, how would you help somebody who has anxiety related to, germs, the concerns that are going out, and who wants to get outside with public health guidelines, but just might feel a little resistant to that as well?
Yeah, people have a lot of personal reactions to what's happening right now, and I want to respect that. And also, I would, recommend encouraging them to stick to the public health guidelines, and then, not necessarily let anxiety. Here, I'll go with this route. I think it's really critical, and I think this is a good lesson for all students, like broadly speaking about their lives, that we don't make the best decisions when we're making them out of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to think about why we're going to make a decision. And if it's about things that are not anxiety, okay. If it's about anxiety, flip the script. We got to figure something else out. And students, the word anxiety, I think, is used often by folks who don't exactly know what it means. And so I think when I try to explain anxiety to students, I say anxiety is fear. So a lot of the anxiety that we're talking about right now is fear of getting sick, but also fear of the unknown. Like, we don't really know how, we don't know concretely how we get this disease. We don't know what's going to happen to us individually if we get this disease. We don't know if we have the ability to survive this disease, each of us. And so that creates a lot of anxiety. And so students, any decisions they're making about their career and their major, don't do it about anxiety. Don't make a decision about fear. Make a decision because it's what you really think about and what your gut says, not because you're scared.
Do you have another sports analogy you can move through there? We've had football, we've had surfing.
Alarmingly, I was a college field hockey goalie a little while ago, but I don't have an analogy for that, except that, well, here we go. How about this one? So you want to protect the goal, but that doesn't mean you just stand in the goal. You go out and you take risks. You got to be proactive about your life. And so, students, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Next question.
Got it. You got it. We're going to have to somehow work in one more sport here. And I say this as somebody who knows little to nothing about sports. So the next question from a parent is talking about a little bit about the relationship between providers and families. So, this parent knows that their student had one session with a counselor. They're concerned they have an undiagnosed, mental health condition. How do you work with parents to make sure that both the privacy of the student is being maintained, but then the parent feels supported and is able to support their student?
Yeah, great question. So we're all on the same team here. We want to get as much information as possible that's going to help us support your students from our perspective. So you should call our office, deliver that information. Our office won't be able to confirm that your student is being seen by us, but we will certainly take that information and put it into the student's file so that the person working with that student can have that information. Oftentimes we prefer that parents talk to a clinician on our staff who's not the person providing services to the student, just so that we can ensure privacy to the student. But we really welcome extra information that's going to help us understand what's happening for someone, because again, you have known these folks for a lot longer than we have. And so there's a lot of valuable information that you have.
That's great. Thank you. And just as a reminder for those, we have one phone number for all of our services, 608-265-5600. You can call that number during typical business hours to speak to somebody in mental health services or receptionist who might be able to connect you to the right person. That number also works as our 24/7 mental health crisis line and our nurse triage line. So one phone number for everything. Our website again is uhs.wisc.edu. There you have information about our providers. You're actually able to sort by providers. So you could support by language. You could You could sort by specialty, meet a little bit about the providers, read their bio, see their specialties, and see what they'll be able to offer your student. So we have about 10 more minutes. With time for one more question coming in from a parent. Again, there's information in the links below to support a student. I'd like us to almost go back a little bit earlier in the conversation, Dr. Nolan, when you were talking a little bit more about structure, when you were talking more about what we or what parents and families can do to support their student. Can you speak a little bit more to what type of structure a parent could talk to their student about, or how they might be able to have that conversation with their student?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is not only good from a sort of trauma-informed care approach, but also because we do know that it's getting harder for students to focus and pay attention because they're working from their dorm rooms most of the time rather than going out to classes. And it's just harder for them to focus. So organization, I mean, and so this may feel basic to many of you, but truly students need to hear this. Having some sort of calendar or agenda where they write down things, breaking things into small chunks. So not trying to do, even if somebody is someone who prides themselves on being a good multitasker, not trying to do too much at once and truly committing yourself to, or the student committing themselves to achievable chunks of time to be able to do things. So if it's 45 minutes, great. If it's 25 minutes, great. Just be self-aware about what is an achievable chunk of time for you and commit yourself to doing work in that time. I do think that the upcoming holidays will be a helpful time for a lot of parents to sort of help students build some structure. Typically it's like students are exhausted when they come back, they want to sleep late, they want to spend a lot of time in their room. It's really important for parents to be a little bit more active at this point in terms of pulling your students to engage more. They have been spending a lot of time on the internet. And again, cheers to the internet, but but like getting them to engage with you and, shifting your family culture if it requires that, so that there is more human engagement and more structure in their lives, because they have been sort of given this extreme flexibility with remote learning that's not necessarily good for their development. And so to compensate for that, I would really recommend helping them create some sort of schedule while they're home in a way that's not going to feel oppressive to them, something that's achievable and still gives them autonomy as young adults. Yeah, I'm just going to start repeating myself, so I'll stop.
No, that's great. So if you were to talk to a parent right now and they were to reach out to their student via text, phone, etc., what would you recommend that they use as a way to start a conversation around mental health? Without having it be like the most awkward conversation ever. Are there ways that a parent could start that conversation that felt like a safe environment?
Sure. I think, it's really going to depend on your pre-existing relationship with your student. But, I think expressing love, even if that feels like you don't get back what you put in that expression, is really important. And then sharing, that you find it really helpful to talk. Lately, you've discovered that it's been really helpful to talk about certain things with your friends because this is kind of a lonely time. So acknowledging how the experience has been and what's been helpful to you. I know that students prefer text messages, but I do think this is really the time for like FaceTime as much as possible for having these conversations because I think, students just get a little bit more and are going to be a little bit more, they're not going to be as distracted from your conversation if you're looking at them. But I think really trusting your gut on your relationship with your child and being genuine and authentic to your relationship with them and the way that you deal with these things. But I would encourage all parents to connect with how you are feeling, how you are managing, what's helping you get through this time, what's not helping you get through this time, and then use that information about yourself to talk to your child, because your child might not be exactly like you, but they're carrying a little piece of you with them, no matter what the genetic situation is. So they have been influenced by you, and there's part of them that is going to be a lot like you.
Yeah, what I hear you say is, be present and persistent. So those two things about really supporting your student. So Dr. Nolan, we are coming up to our last 5 minutes. It's been fantastic to spend this time with you. I know that like I said, I've learned a lot from this as a parent myself. So good thing I get to work with Dr. Nolan, so I can continue to pepper her with the questions, just like I do with the people in medical. I get to ask them questions throughout the day. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask you if there's anything else you want to share, but if there were questions that you didn't have answered, please know that you can send an email to parent@uwmad.wisc.edu. That email is listed below, and we'll be sure to get you an answer. I know that Stephanie and Monica that work at the Parent Family program, we are in constant contact. So Dr. Nolan often gets emails from them. So when we talk about how there are many people on campus here to support you, we really mean many, and we are in constant contact, routing questions, trying to get the answer as fast as possible, with both Dr. Nolan and also Dr. Kelly, our medical director, trying to get you the answers to support you and your student the best. So any final questions, suggestions, tips, or tricks you'd like to share today?
Yeah, just two quick things. One thing we know for sure about UW-Madison students almost exclusively is that perfectionism is real. And now is not a time for perfection. So perfectionism is already sort of a dangerous thing. There's a difference between adaptive perfectionism, where it's like your perfectionism pushes you to do a really good job, but you can still sleep at night, versus maladaptive perfectionism, which we see in a lot of students, where they want to be perfect at the expense of their health and well-being. And right now, there is no such thing as perfect. I mean, we know that there never is, but truly right now, no one is going to be able to achieve what they consider to be perfect. We're all striving for good enough. And so you want to have the empathy and support for your students that this is the world they're living in, and let's just help everybody get through this period. There is light on the other side of this, but we're not going to be helping ourselves if we try to do this perfectly. The other thing I would say is that I love talking to parents, genuinely here for you. So please do reach out to my office and reach out to me personally if there's anything I can do. But I also work closely with parent and family programs. So happy to take questions that way too.
Thank you. I sure feel better. So this was an hour well spent with psychologist and Director of Mental Health Services, Dr. Sarah Nolan. We thank you so much for your time. Again, I just want to put our information below for UHS, University Health Services. We have one phone number for all of our services. That's 608-265-5600. You can call that to make appointments, speak to someone during the typical business hours. It's also the number for our 24/7 mental health crisis line and our medical triage line. And our website is uhs.wisc.edu. There you can make appointments. You can look at our providers. You can learn a whole host of other things that we're able to provide. There is information just for parents and families there that lists a lot of this information, the tips and tricks that Dr. Nolan also talked about. So we thank you so much. Please continue to stay engaged with us. You can like us on Facebook. You can connect with us through the Parent and Family program. We are so excited that you're part of the Badger family. And please believe us when, again, we say continuously, we are here for you. We are here for your student. And we wish you all the best of the rest of a fantastic semester. Thanks so much.